This week on Snark Squad Pod, we're joined by Jenny Trout to talk about NBC's The Good Place. Welcome back to Snark Squad Pod. My name is Marinez.
I'm Nicole Sweeney, and we are joined this week by Jenny Trout.
Hi, I'm Jenny Trout. I am an author and a blogger, and I was born in the eye in Jeremy Bear Me. I was in the dot over the eye.
And Jenny is here with us this week to talk to us about The Good Place, which I'm super excited about. I think this is one of the first things I put on the spreadsheet, but it just lived on the spreadsheet and we never did anything with it. And I don't know, the finale was coming up. I have no idea why we decided that we were going to talk about it, but the season 3 finale was coming up, and the scheduling stars aligned. Jenny said she wanted to talk about it, and we were like, great, done. We're doing The Good Place. So The Good Place, I have expressed repeatedly my ambivalence about spoilers, but I'm actually a little bit sad that I'm about to, if you have not watched The Good Place, you should stop listening and go watch the first season before I tell you what The Good Place is about. And I say this as somebody who doesn't care about spoilers. Go watch season 1 and then come back and you can listen to us spoil season 2 and 3, and that's fine. I don't care. But The Good Place, having dispensed with that spoiler warning, The Good Place begins with Eleanor Shellstrop, newly dead and arriving in a waiting room where she's greeted by Michael, who explains to her that she's dead and she is in the good place. Only problem, Eleanor soon realizes that there has been a mistake and they believe that she is someone else. They have her name right, but her whole life, she was kind of a really shitty person, and they have mistaken her for a lawyer who got people off of death row and was volunteering for impoverished children in developing nations and whatnot. But so that's who they think she is. That's definitely not who she is, but she's paired off with a soulmate named Chidi, who was a moral philosophy professor. And she convinces Chidi to help her learn to become a good person so that she can sort of earn her place in the good place. She also meets her neighbor, Tahani, who was a fabulous socialite in her life, and Tahani's soulmate, who also is not who he at first appears, named Jason, who he is mistaken for a monk who has taken a vow of silence. Jason is, in fact, also a garbage person from Florida. Eleanor's a garbage person from Arizona, so I'm really sorry to people from Arizona or Florida. You are not well,
including me,
well represented by this show. This show does not have a good attitude towards you. Shenanigans ensue as they try to hide their identities. Their identities are exposed, and there's some confusion about whether or not Eleanor and Jason will be sent to the bad place. And it's in the season 1 finale, while they're bickering over what they're going to do, 2 people have to be sent to the bad place. And Eleanor realizes while they're fighting about this that, in fact, they are not in the good place. They're in the bad place. And this whole thing is a really elaborate ploy for them to torture each other unintentionally. And so that's season 1. In season 2, Michael wipes their memories and runs the experiment again, trying to find new ways to torture them. But during this process, along the way, Michael becomes friends with the humans. And in season 3, they try to escape. They try to basically outsmart the bad place who wants to come collect the humans. There's a lot more going on here. It's very complicated, but you have this sort of core cast of characters. It's a very feel good show. Oh, I forgot about Janet. Janet is she's the mainframe of the neighborhoods, of the afterlife neighborhoods, and she belongs to the good place. Michael ported her into his fake good place to help sell the ruse of his fake good place. And it's a delightful, charming little show. Every episode is a philosophy lesson, kind of baked into it. And yeah, that's The Good Place. I didn't do a great job of explaining it, but that's The Good Place.
Hey, you hit all the major points.
And it does kind of like reset itself often. You know what I mean? Like it kind of like you think it's one thing and it has its, core, like you said, philosophy lesson and humor baked in, but the plot itself just veers off in like 3 or 4 different directions as you continue through the series. So
it's
good
a journey.
Job. Yeah.
It feels like it's been on a lot longer than 3 seasons.
Right? And 3 short seasons too.
Yeah, and it's just because of like just how much story that they've packed in there.
Yes.
So we're going to start where we always start. I've tipped my hand a little, but did you like this, Jenny?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think this is honestly one of the best fantasy series on TV in a long time.
This is my first time watching it, and it's one of those shows that you see people on Twitter and people have explicitly told me like, hey, are you watching this? You should be. And because we covered Veronica Mars on the blog, whenever Kristen Bell is anywhere, people are like, hey, have you seen this? So
Kristen Bell did another thing.
Yeah, you know her, right? And we're like, yes. But yeah, so this has been on my radar. And I think actually it was one of the pilots that I watched during this fall season, whenever it was, because we do that pilot recap as well. So I watched the pilot and I thought it was amazing, but I have a little to no follow through and I never watched anything else with it. So I binged it, literally all 3 seasons in these past 2 days, and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. I didn't think I was going to experience anything different, but I was also pleasantly surprised by what I found. Like, I didn't expect the big twist in season 1. I didn't expect all the ways that it kept kind of reinventing itself to keep the story going. Mm-hmm. And I just really enjoyed all of the characters and humor. And it has some of my favorite tropes and themes of all time, like in the story itself, which I'm sure we'll get to. So yes, all positive feelings and experiences.
This is like so funny to me to like hear you say, I just started watching it and I just finished it, because I started watching it on Hulu, like when the whole season unlocked, I watched it, and like the second season was going on or something at the time. And I was watching that, and it got to the point where I would go to bed at night and I would turn on The Good Place and I would fall asleep watching it. And I started keeping track. I'm like, I think I've seen the first 2 seasons 30 times total. Like, I have this show memorized. I'm obsessed with it. So I'm like hearing you say, I just watched it. And I'm thinking, I'm so jealous of you for watching it for the first time.
You just got to have this experience. Yeah. I'm so happy for you.
You're also talking to the exact right audience, because Nicole and I, we both have this thing where we've listened to Pride and Prejudice a million times because we listen to it like on audiobook to fall asleep. So yeah, man, I feel you.
Soothing. And 100%. Right. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense why you would pick this as your thing as a thing to fall asleep to. I watched it for the first time like shortly after the first season finished airing, and like right when I think when it first came up on Hulu, maybe. I was sick and I like took a sick day, and I was like, okay, sure, I'll start watching the show, and was devastated when it was over after 4 hours the first season. I was like, no, wait, I need more. I need more of the show. But it's just so delightful, and a lot of really, really interesting tropes and reinventions. I think that's one of the things that strikes me so much about the show is that it feels like, well, it surely is over, right? Like you've hit the dead end, and then they keep finding a way to like reinvent it in such interesting ways.
I just thought at the end of season 2, I was like, where are they even going to take this?
Right.
Like at this point, where are they going to go? Like, oh, hey, they're going to go in another direction and it's going to be just as good.
I think that after watching the pilot, that was kind of what my thoughts were too, is, how long can you keep up this whole idea or premise of person who doesn't belong in the good place trying to fake her way through the good place? It just seemed like a very limited thing. And even while I started watching it, I thought, I expected that by the end of season 1, we would get some kind of reveal, but that comes sooner than I expected it. So there were a lot of ways that it kind of kept me off balance, and I did not guess a single thing correctly. I'm also very bad at guessing, but it did a good job, like we've been saying, redirecting and reinventing itself.
Mari, you mentioned the tropes in the show, that it has some of your favorite tropes. So what are a few that stand out for you?
Some of my favorite stories are fish out of water stories. And you get that element a lot, I think, from both Janet and Michael in terms of like trying to understand what it is to be human. And I guess you could also argue with Kristen Bell's character, Eleanor, trying to, be good, and she's kind of out of her element. But my favorite parts were from Michael and Janet, just trying to, I don't know, every time he was like, oh, suspenders. Or he got a box of like useless human stuff as a gift, and he was just so happy, and he was so excited about getting motion sick on a bus. Like, so those things, I don't know, they just are so charming to me. And to see like human life through that lens of how, a little bit ridiculous it is. And it is. But also that's kind of part of the charm. That was one of my favorite elements, I would say.
You know what I think was really interesting about the whole thing with Michael, and how you really did like him when you thought he was this clueless, bumbling, good place architect. And then the reveal came, and I expected to not like him anymore. And that just did not happen.
Right. Watching the turn of Ted Danson's countenance in that moment is also just, oh man. I think I loved the show on that initial binge watch, but it was like, that was the moment, one, that reveal that I did not see coming. And then just like watching him, I don't know, just get to do that. I was like, oh, this is like really good. I know I've been having fun sitting on the couch, but this is actually a really fucking good show.
And he sold it. He sold, bumbling, good place architect. He sold demon, just getting pure delight out of torturing them. And then he sold like totally out of his element and having panic attacks and having to deal with gaining all of these emotions. Like, I believed all three of those from him. And if in the next episode they told me that he was fooling them all along, I would have been like, yes, I also believe that. Like, anything, he's like selling it all to me, which I think is just, a credit to the actor and the writers and everything that's happening on the show.
Oh, the trolley problem, when he was trying to grasp the concept of the trolley problem, and his answer was like how to kill everyone.
Right.
And it was just like this, and you're like, okay, he's so evil, but he's trying. He's got the spirit.
The other, I guess, big trope that jumps out, obviously, is found family. But there's just a really lovely and delightful little found family. Eleanor's speech at the end of the first season, where she's talking about how, obviously, the goal was for them to torture each other, but like eventually they found each other and supported each other and worked together. And in a lot of ways, like, obviously it's a stand-in for, look what humanity can be, but it's also, this is, a summary of what is good and lovely about a found family as well at the same time. And I thoroughly enjoyed that.
One that I don't know if this would be like, it's not even like the forefront of the story. I really love Janet as a character, but it's because one of my other favorite tropes is AI and just kind of gaining humanity and what it means to be human. And obviously what it means to be human is like a big, big theme here in general, especially they're trying to be good humans, but you get a really great foil in Janet and kind of her learning and like acquiring all these things. And I think it was interesting because Janet marries Jason pretty early on in the series, and then that becomes a thing because her feelings for him never really go away. But in the beginning I was very uncomfortable with that, and I think you're supposed to be, right? Like, he married a robot and there's jokes about weird sex things and you're like, what's going on?
Well, and even at the wedding too, they're like, does anyone object? And both Eleanor and Tahani are like, yes, of course.
Yeah, of course we do. Yeah.
How could we not?
Although we have to point out, though, Janet, not a robot.
Not a robot.
Not a robot. Not a robot. Not a girl.
Not a girl. Not a robot. But yeah, something about her, and towards the end where she's like, I'm not a robot and I'm not a girl, but like I'm not Janet anymore. She's changing, she's evolving. So that entire idea of like the mainframe evolving, that was very interesting to me.
I have a fan theory about Janet.
I love it. Go.
Okay. I feel like Janet might be God, because Janet has all the knowledge in the universe. There are parts of her that are bad, because there's bad Janet, there's neutral Janet, there's good Janet, but it's all the sum total of the entire universe sort of is in all of these Janets. And my feeling is that this particular Janet might be like a sort of arm of the universe or God or whatever you want to call it that has become self-aware. And I kind of feel like that might be a direction they'll end up going in, like that we'll find out, like, oh, hey, Janet has all this information because she actually is whatever this cosmic source is.
I love this. And so like their Janet is one of like there's like a single Janet somewhere, like core Janet, right? And this is like one of the many Janets moving through the world doing her Janet God
yes, exactly.
I love this. I'm here for this fanfic. If anybody wants to write it, send it to me.
Right, send me a link. I don't have time to write the fanfic, but if somebody else wants to.
I personally won't write it, but we'll definitely read it.
Yeah, right.
So the funniest thing about how like binging it this weekend and how this has stayed with me, obviously like the whole idea of a good place, a bad place, and an afterlife, right? There's like some, I guess, theology there. It's borrowing from things of religion and making up its own universe. But I literally was driving today and someone cut me off in the nastiest style, and all I could think was like, negative points for you, bitch. Like, so this idea, I don't know, it's just like stuck in my head of like our actions accumulating points, and I see things and this is what I'm thinking. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, honestly.
Well, see, but now you're like Doug Forsett. You're like trying to weigh out all of your actions and uh-oh.
And are your motivations corrupt now? Who knows?
I'm aware now. So, moral desserts and all that. Before I even started watching for this weekend, there was a tweet that I don't know how like viral it went, but I saw it pop up on my timeline multiple times, but it was somebody grousing about like couples who have no chemistry, and I don't know if they're all
Glenn Weldon was complaining on Twitter. I think it was Glenn Weldon. It was definitely somebody from Pop Culture Happy Hour about like Mike Schur show central couples not having chemistry. So like Eleanor and Chidi have no chemistry. Ben and Leslie never had chemistry. Jake and Amy have no chemistry. That was that was the crux of the tweet. Yes, but I
had no idea who it came from.
Yeah, he kind of went on to like differentiate though that to him he was specifically referring to sexual chemistry, and it became like a whole sidebar about like do the heterosexuals not differentiate between romantic chemistry and like sexual chemistry and whatever. But yes, I know exactly the tweet you're talking about.
So I saw this tweet and I had only watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I guess. So, and then I started watching this. And so I want to hear what you guys think about the Chidi and Eleanor relationship, because I think we talked about like found family being in here, but Chidi and Eleanor's relationship is like very foundational to what's going on. And so there's this entire idea that even across multiple of their lives and after getting rebooted, they always find each other and help each other. And even when their relationship is not romantic, like they agree to help each other. So how do you guys feel about that? And do you agree that they don't have like romantic or sexual chemistry?
I disagree that they don't have romantic or sexual. I think they have tons of chemistry. And so I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that, to be honest, I think that sometimes I see people criticizing and saying they don't have chemistry, but it's usually coming from people that want to see Tahani and Eleanor hooking up.
Yeah. I mean, which I can sympathize with 100%. Like they give that brief a flash when they show the cycle of the like many iterations that they don't show of the resets in season 2. They show that there was a reset in which Tahani and Eleanor were assigned as soulmates, and so that is definitely like one that I'm like, oh yeah, I would have watched. I wish we could have seen that one, but also I firmly disagree. I do think that Chidi and Eleanor have plenty of chemistry. I don't like the show is just not particularly sexual in nature. And so I like that to me would feel out of, I feel like what he's looking for would be out of place on this show. I don't know. I'm a little perplexed by the critique as well.
It just seems like, I don't know. The idea that there's no chemistry. Well, there's tons of chemistry there, but it's almost like if you watch the first season, it doesn't seem like there is. It's almost like you start to feel that there is chemistry there, probably right around the line when she asks Michael how many of the reboots did she ask Chidi for help, and he said no, and it was never. He'd always helped her. And it was like that was the moment that laid like the groundwork for, okay, like they might actually really be soulmates. Mm-hmm. And while I think that the whole Tahani and Eleanor thing is, cute or whatever, we're at the point in the series where Eleanor and Chidi, their relationship is so tied into the direction of the story that I'm like, I can't even really ship anything else now.
It is. It's like very foundational. And that's been kind of the entire point. Even when you switch directions and they're alive again and they're on Earth, like they have to find each other again. Even if, she is trying to hook him up with somebody else romantically, like there's just something there about them helping each other and their willingness to help each other that like I'm shipping that more than anything else. Like, yes, be together, help each other, and see where that develops.
One thing I really like about this show too is that romantic competition isn't a thing so much. Like there's this one life that they have in season 3, which is still the life that at least Eleanor is still on, where she actively encouraged him to hook up with someone she thought would be good for him. And there's not like a jealousy thing there. There's not some, oh, this is this horrible other woman and I don't really want them to get together. She was like, yeah, this is a great, idea and get together with her and you guys will be very happy. I really liked that. I thought that was refreshing.
You see that really early on too, because at first Tahani thinks that that Chidi loves her and not the other way around. But she confesses that right as Eleanor does as well. And they start to almost squabble. But Eleanor, even being like early on in the season and not being quite a good person yet, is like, no, we're not doing this. And they just end up hanging out the whole day and becoming friends. So it's like really, really, you don't often see that. And you even see it with Janet, who has like all of these feelings and is obviously struggling. But then at one point is like, okay, I'm going to go be by myself and process this. It isn't necessarily shown as like a competition thing.
Yeah.
This is the bad place that my head goes to, but I would hate to think that any part of people thinking that Chidi and Eleanor don't have chemistry is that you don't, typically see couples like them on TV. Mm. So obviously it's like a mixed race thing. And I don't know, Chidi, the actor who plays him, is probably not what you would consider like traditionally Hollywood handsome, even though I think he's a very handsome guy. So I don't know. There's a part of that when people look at that and are like, nah, boo, no chemistry. I'm like, please don't say that in my timeline or anywhere near me. Like, but it's something that I appreciated watching. So
yeah, I think that's a really that's a really good point. And I think it's also interesting that could be an issue, whereas people don't have a huge problem with the idea of Janet and Jason or Tahani and Jason. It's when you specifically throw a white woman and a black man together that you start to see people go, oh, I don't see the chemistry.
Right. Janet's literally a robot. and
Yeah,
nobody's
they're
like,
fine with
I
that.
don't know. Yeah. Sorry, not a robot. You know what I mean?
Right, but yeah, like she's AI, and they're totally fine with this, whole idea. But then it's like, oh well, there's no chemistry. It's like she wasn't even human, and we're supposed to accept a romantic thing with a character, but you can't accept this thing.
I will say, I think because we're referencing like a fairly specific version of this critique, it's a couple that is very similar to like the examples he gave were three like fairly similar examples in terms of the way that they play out in their respective shows. Just obviously like there are fundamental differences in the characters, but the nature of the relationships are like best friends. I think probably like first and foremost in the case of not only Eleanor and Chidi, but especially so in the case of Ben and Leslie and Jake and Amy. And so I wonder how much of that is the thing that is also driving where this critique is coming from. I'm not really sure, but I in fairness to the critique, like the other examples that were given don't fall into this.
I think too, like if somebody critiqued the Eleanor and Chidi relationship and said it doesn't make sense to me because overall he is actually a pretty good person, he did spend his entire life in a selfish pursuit of trying to be the best human, basically. But
he's like the least bad one. He's the one who I most take issue with, like his belonging in the bad place.
I mean, I can see where I think it kind of comes from the same place as Tahani with the idea of motivations being corrupt. Like he was willing to hurt people around him in order to stick to what he perceived as the best way to live his life.
Right.
And so I can kind of see why he's there. But yeah, he's the least bad of all the group and he's caused the least harm. And so then when you pair him with someone like Eleanor, it might not make sense to some viewers.
Right.
It makes sense to me though, but that's probably just because I'm a bad person. And
I was when Eleanor is taking like that first like quiz or whatever to see if she's a bad person, and the questions are about like if she's ever paid money to see the Red Hot Chili Peppers and things like that. Mm-hmm. I was taking the quiz at home too, like, oh my God, like, would I pass this? But I think it's funny that we, are also sitting and like passing our own judgment, like which of them is the least bad, who caused the most harm?
Which, like, given where we're at, where the show ultimately goes is, it's like, not the point.
Right. But also, you can't help it.
Bringing up that critique is interesting, though, because it does make me think a lot about how this compares to, the other shows mentioned. It's interesting because you can very much feel the hand of, okay, yes, this is made by the same people. I did not know going into it, but while I was watching it, I was like, this feels a lot like Parks and Rec. And then I Googled it and I was like, yep, okay, I get it. Makes sense. But I will say that like Parks and Rec and, Brooklyn Nine-Nine have a ton more in common by virtue of being, workplace comedies. This show is just doing something so delightfully interesting and good and weird that even as much as I love both of those other shows, there's a part of me that's like, no, this is different. This is different. Stop making these comparisons. I understand there's a very similar sensibility in the comedy, and so that I understand why inevitably those comparisons are made. But like, part of what makes this show so great, it has nothing to do with all of the comedy. Like, yes, that's great, but the overall concept and the way that they are handling this concept is just so fucking interesting that it feels like it's in a whole separate class to me.
Well, it's a different genre. I mean, when you look at this is very much a fantasy show. It doesn't have dragons or anything, but I mean, it's a fantasy show. And the other two are more parody or satire of certain environments. And there was a cynicism, as positive as Leslie Knope was, Parks and Rec itself was took a very cynical view of government. And then with Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I don't know how I would classify that. I haven't watched the entire series, but they're in their own little satirical real life situations as opposed to fantasy. And I think it gives this show such a different tone.
Yeah, that is totally what I was getting at. I didn't have the words for it, but that is 100% what I meant. Yes, that like the fantasy element makes it like that is the thing that makes it sort of fundamentally different and gives it that different tone.
And I think with this compared to the other two, which I haven't watched any Parks and Rec and most of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but I think that this has a wider view. You know, you talked about them being like kind of workplace kind of comedies or, you know, government or police force, but The Good Place is a lot about humanity, and there's like such a like wider view of like society, and the jokes are a lot about like societal things or shared experiences or common experiences that I think it like opens up a little the humor, and they go in so many directions, and they can go in so many directions just because I think it has that wider view.
Which is why they keep, you know, writing themselves into positions that as a viewer, you are left thinking, well, surely this is as far as this can go. And then they respond with, yeah, it's a fantasy. We can just scrap the whole thing and
start
over. And
you're dead. You're alive. You're dead again.
You're in a void.
Yeah, the episode where they're all in the void and they're all Janets, she deserves a freaking Emmy.
Yes. Darcy Carden has been great on the show throughout, but that episode in particular is just, oh man, it's so good. It's so wonderful.
So we've talked about Janet a few times here, and I've mentioned she's one of my favorite characters, but I want to talk about some of the other characters. So how about thoughts and feelings on Jason Mendoza?
I did not see that coming. I did not see that coming with Jason at all. That was like probably one of my favorite parts of the first season, was just when he freaked out at the end.
It's funny though, because you know the show tells you that it's possible. It's like Eleanor got in here by mistake, and never once did my brain go, "Ooh, is anybody else here by mistake?" Like I accept it at face value, like, you know. And you see how frustrated that Tahani is with his vow of silence in the first season, and I was just like, yeah, man, I didn't think anything of it, and then for him to go from like Buddhist monk to Jason Mendoza from Jacksonville and all that, like it's just such a wide swing, and it was amazing. And as much as like they crap on Florida, it's Jacksonville, which is like way north of me, so I'm fine.
I'm fine with
that. They do outright say at the end of the first season when Sean shows up posing as the judge, when he's like weighing Jason, he's like, oh, he's from Florida. Yeah,
Florida.
Yeah. Bad. I like the ways that they deployed his character to like periodically say very, you know, insightful and wise things, and everybody has this moment of wow, that's correct. That is indeed a good point.
Best moment of season 2 is in, I think it's either the first or the second episode, when he explains why that they should trust Michael because he's wearing a bow tie. And he tells that long story about how he was at the gun range in the bus station, and it's just it just stacks up. Like every word he says, it's hilarious. And when he finishes and they're all silent and they wait until he puts the sucker in his mouth and Eleanor slaps it out of his mouth. The timing in that moment. Yeah. I've seen it 30 times. I still laugh every single time. I'm like, oh, just the timing.
I think they fit him in so well too into the little found family, where everybody gets kind of exasperated with him, but he does have those moments where he says something, and every once in a while he'll say something and Eleanor just shoots him a high five. Like it's usually something about like trashy food or like, I don't know, some experience that she's like, yeah, man. So having that connection to Eleanor, and you know, I think they just slotted him in super well, especially because I feel like the other three maybe have more in common, but he definitely rounds out the little found family. How about Tahani?
Oh, she's perfect. She's perfect. She's the hot, rich fraud, as Eleanor describes her, that I want to be her, but also I kind of want to make out with her.
Yep. That's correct.
I think Eleanor would same you on that one.
Yes. It's also, I mean, to go back to making the comparisons to other shows, it is very much the, like, Anne and Leslie, but, like, make it a little bit gay. It's like, what's going on there? You know, you have a lot of the, like, you take all of the Leslie compliments of Anne and, like, make them a little bit sexual, and that's every word that Eleanor says about Tahani in this show, and I support that. I support that twist. I'm here for it. I also just enjoy the way that her character works, especially in the first season, in building towards that reveal, in that Eleanor was right about her from the jump. You know, that Eleanor figured out very early on why Tahani belongs in the bad place. But it was so fueled by her own issues and, you know, by just the reasons that they were put together in this fake good place. And I don't know, I enjoyed that because it's another way in which the show tells you what it's doing, but, like, you don't quite see it, much like, you know, Jason turning out to be also not somebody who belongs in the good place. That reveal happening before we learn that it's the bad place and whatever. But it's a way that the show, like, tips its hand and you just miss it entirely.
Oh, with Tahani, I couldn't figure out if I was supposed to like her or not like her because she was just so, I mean, like, the things she said and you were like, oh my God, I would lose my mind if I was around a person like that. If somebody's name was congratulations, beautiful, I would just turn around and walk away. That would be it. I would just be like, oh, is that what that means? Okay, well, bye. But I think I might be a little bit Eleanor, but she was just so, like, but she was good too, because they would say the good things that she did and you're like, oh, she's so awful, but she did good things. And so am I supposed to dislike her, or is she really a good person? And so when you find out that, like, yeah, she did do all of these things, but it was specifically to try to get attention, you're like, there it was. There it is. Put my finger on it right there.
In the reveal at the end of season 1, when she's talking about why she totally deserves to be there, but she frames it around, you know, her own self-importance, and Michael just doesn't say any words, just gives her a face. Oh, right, yep.
Our entry point into the story is clearly Eleanor, and I think they did a good job of setting that up, because I feel like I'm a little Eleanor too.
Right. Yes.
There's so many moments that, you know, she's like, oh, I mean, obviously a lot of her behavior, like, veers off into areas where you're like, okay, no, that, you know, I would not go to that extreme. But a lot of it is also very, like, relatable, at least in thinking, like, no, I don't want to sing happy birthday to my coworkers because this is a terrible experience for all of us. So things like that, you know, give you the entry point into the story. But a lot of times in these ensembles, the main characters often kind of get overlooked, and favorites end up being, like, the supporting characters or whatnot. So how did you guys feel about Eleanor? And would you say that she's your favorite character, or would you pick somebody else?
We're supposed to pick? I can't do that. I can't.
No, I want you to.
No, this is terrible.
How dare I'm making you?
Oh, no.
That's terrible.
I love Eleanor. I think she's fantastic, and I think that the reason that everybody kind of relates to her a little bit is, well, for exactly the sort of reasons that they kind of came up with in season 3, where now it's become like this anti-capitalist sort of message, where it's, hey, it's impossible to make any good choices. And then when they were talking about that, about how hard it is to be a person, a human, because every choice you make has, you know, negative consequences and all of that. And then I think back to the episode where she flipped out about the coffee place and the guy that was sexually harassing people at the coffee place, and how, oh, well, now I can't do this because I can't go to this, you know, this basketball game, and I can't go to, you know, this restaurant or whatever.
There's a sandwich and it's delicious, and when you eat it, it means you hate gay people.
Yes, exactly. And so if you like, when you look at that in the show, and you go, maybe that's why she's so relatable, because we all do want to do good, and there is something about Eleanor. She does want to do good, but it's just exhausting. And so she does the things we all kind of wish we could do, like tell people, like, no, I'm not going to have a birthday cake from you. I brought my own from home, and I don't want to be obligated to you. No, I'm not gonna, I'm not going to take responsibility for your dog because I want to go to this Rihanna concert. And so it's all of those things that you really think to yourself, God, if I didn't have a moral compass, this is how I would be acting.
The best part about like that stuff of, you see it kind of echoed in Chidi's story too, because he talks about like, oh, I drank almond milk, even though I know almonds are, bad. And then he gets completely paralyzed because he's been eating blueberry muffins, but somebody tells him that the workers who pick blueberries are mistreated. And so all of these things paralyze him. And whereas in Eleanor's story, she's just like, you know what? I can't not do these things. Like I have to, like, I'm not going to stop drinking coffee. It is what it is. So seeing that foil and just kind of the back and forth between them was really a good setup, I think.
I think that's where a lot of their chemistry that they allegedly don't have comes from, because they're saying, like when you put them together, like he's one extreme and she's the other, but when you put them together, she has taught him how to maybe loosen up a little bit, and he has taught her like, hey, it is hard to be a bad person, but it's worth trying. Or it's hard to be a good person. It's worth trying being a good person. And so I guess that's why I can't understand people saying there's no chemistry there. Because to me, I'm like, I write romance novels. To me, right there, that's goal, motivation, and conflict meeting each other, and that's a perfect relationship.
I mean, people are welcome to their wrong opinions. So.
That's right.
You brought up the like anti-capitalist tone of season 3, and that's the other thing I have really enjoyed watching the show. I don't know, take on current events in just really charming ways. We're refugees. What kind of monsters would turn us away? And just like, I'm curious how you guys have found that. I think the flip side of that, though, is that it runs the risk of maybe being a little heavy-handed. It's hard for me to know, because I'm obviously so the audience for it, right? That I'm like, yes, you have successfully spoken to me. So I don't know, maybe we need an additional outside opinion to be sure. But how have you found those elements of the show, and in particular the third season?
I think the tone, again, it's a tone thing, and I think the tone here allows for it. There is a moment that sticks out in my head in the third season where the judge is telling Michael that all of his meddling has consequences, and she's just listing like current event things, like the Jaguars are in the playoffs, and and it's like, I mean, yes, it's heavy-handed because she's literally just listing them, but the tone works because, again, you've got that wide view of society, and you've got that like outside perspective of Michael, like they're eternal beings, but also Michael doesn't quite know what it means to be a human, and he's figuring all of these things out. And I think when you have that sort of tone baked in, there's a lot that you can just do kind of overtly with, and that's the sense of humor, really. It's commentary on things that are happening currently. So I thought that's one of my favorite sequences in season 3. So obviously I'm the correct audience for it as well.
I think it's the fact that it's so ridiculous. If they were doing this in a drama, if it was presented as a very serious drama, like a What Dreams May Come type thing, it would not work the same way. Being like the sort of farce and satire type thing that it is, the fact that they can say something like, there's this sandwich that's chicken and you can eat it, but it means you hate gay people, and you can go, you know what? When it comes down to it, that is absolutely, it's true, but it's ridiculous. And we live in this, and you can laugh and you can go, that is the most ridiculous way that you can put that statement. Because you could sit down and you could say, the judge could sit there and say, well, they give money to anti-gay hate organizations and blah, blah, blah. That's not funny. What's funny is when you take it completely out of context and say, if you eat this sandwich, it means you hate gay people.
Right.
And
that's the humor, right?
Yeah. And you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we live in a world where this is a thing, but it's absolutely a thing.
But also true.
Right. And so when you have that sort of ridiculous take on all of those things, like the sequence where she's talking about how, the Jaguars are in the playoffs and they're kind of good now or something. And then that Hugh Jackman P.T. Barnum movie made like $4 billion. And you're going, these are like the serious consequences that were faced from that is just hilarious, and that's what makes it work.
And building off of that, and going back to what Mario was saying before about the way the show uses both Janet and Michael as fish out of water characters and learning how to be human, it fits so well because the show is constantly saying, look how fucking ridiculous humanity is. Like that's the whole thing the show is doing all the time, always. And so yes, when they make jokes that are more explicitly political, it's just part of the thing that they've been doing since day one.
And everything is approached that way too, even the things that are non-specific. Like when you look at the accounting department and there's one guy that handles all the weird sex things. and you're like, okay, that's hilarious. That's his job. Hey, as people, we really do that. And the thing about frozen yogurt, when he says you take something good and you ruin it just a little so you can have more of it. And just all of those little things that you go, haha, we do that. It almost makes you feel safe. Like it's non-threatening, right. It's not specific. And then all of a sudden, bam, they hit you with, hey, by the way, your Chick-fil-A is making, people go to conversion therapy.
Right.
And you go, that's true. But because they're presenting it in the same way, it feels much less preachy, I guess.
Yeah. The entire commentary about clam chowder, there's a fountain of clam chowder and she keeps calling it different I don't know, a sea of just gross things. And I just kept thinking, I've eaten clam chowder and I don't know why.
It's just hot ocean milk with dead animal croutons.
Ocean milk. I haven't forgotten that you guys haven't picked a favorite character. I really want you to.
Oh, it's so hard though. Gosh, who would you?
You belong in the bad place.
Yeah, that's a million points that you just lost.
My favorite character is not you. Okay.
There were also a ton of guest appearances, and there are people that work, I guess, a lot on Mike Schur's other shows. And I thought that was delightful too, just kind of seeing people eat. I mean, there's that, and then you get Kristen Bell's husband, Dax Shepard, just shows up and he's suddenly, I don't know. I thought all of that was super cool as well. And all the side characters, I thought really added a lot from, Vicky in the first season who just wanted a bigger bit and she just kept fighting for a larger role.
For 3 hours.
Right. To Maya Rudolph, who ends up being the judge. And I thought also did a really great job with the role. So I think that even outside of our core four, and then you have Janet and Michael, there were just so many delightful appearances and side characters that made this a good experience as well.
Of the side characters, I think Adam Scott was my favorite, with Maya Rudolph as a close second.
You know what? I can pick a favorite character now that we've talked about side characters. My favorite character is Mindy St. James. All she wants to do is sit in her ugly house and do coke all the time and be left alone. And I can identify on such a deep level that she is what she is. She presents herself exactly how she is. She's my favorite character.
Just want to hang out alone, garden naked, do cocaine.
Cut up Anne Rice books to make them into pornography.
Cut up books and to make porn, right?
Can I just be that mean person who loved the fact that in the medium place, that was what she had to read? They're like, oh, we're going to put her in the medium place. Okay, well, we're going to give her Anne Rice novels.
Anne Rice novels, yes. to go with her warm beer. Like, yes, that fits.
Her Eagles live recordings.
We've talked a lot, obviously, about things that we loved about the show. It's kind of unanimous here. Was there anything that you guys have as a criticism, or maybe even something you'd like to see for future seasons?
It's hard for me to say, here are the things that I would like to see, because I trust this show so fully that I'm like, I just want to see what you're gonna do. I don't know, man. I'm not interested in, I want to see you do this, this, and this, because I just want to know. I'm excited to see where they're gonna take it.
Yeah, I don't feel qualified to
try
to. I did a tarot reading to see if I could guess what was going to happen. Right. But I don't feel like I'm qualified to say, I think it should go in this direction. And as for criticisms, I have no criticisms. If I had to pick one thing, I would really like to hear Eleanor say out loud that she is bisexual. Because she said the word bisexual, and it's been made clear that she is attracted, to more than, just Chidi and more than just men. I would just really love to hear her say that she's bi or she's pan. I would like to hear the word out loud.
Same. Yes, 100%. Especially because, and she has that whole speech too about how, more men should be bi. And the word is used in that way. And yes, I agree that I would very much like to have the show be explicit about it. There was the cast was on Conan recently. I don't know. I didn't actually see the episode, but Facebook keeps showing me clips of them. And I'm like, you're right, Facebook. This is, I think I've probably effectively
relevant
seen
content.
The whole episode through all of the clips that Facebook keeps showing me. But Kristen Bell says something to the effect of why do we need to do the why do we need the labels type thing? And I'm like, oh no, don't say that, because we do. It matters. Please just use those words. And I firmly agree. I appreciate the way that they have let that representation play out so far, but 100% would love to hear the show be explicit about it.
Yeah, just say the B word. It's all right. Just say it.
I will say I'm qualified. No, I'm not. I'm just going to say my opinion anyway. That's the human thing, having unearned confidence, right? Yeah. I don't want them to end up in the good place or the bad place. I hope that the outcome is that they end up in some sort of creation of their own. That's my only thing where I'm like, that's where I would like that to go.
Like the medium place as it currently exists, or like a revamping of the medium place?
Maybe a revamping of a medium place, yeah. Or for the idea of the good and bad place to be changed significantly because of what happened to them.
Right.
So there.
Well, they did just build the good place. They built the fake good place in the medium place.
Right.
Right.
So maybe we'll end up seeing them at the end of the whole series being in the medium place, but that medium place existing for the people who haven't gotten into the good place in 500 years because of the point system not matching up to real life on Earth. Maybe that's how it'll end, that'll be where people go.
That does seem like a logical direction, but I don't know, man. I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, you can't guess. I mean, it might seem logical, but you can't guess.
This all tracks. Also, yeah. Janet's God.
Right.
And on that note, we will wrap up this week's episode. Thank you to Jenny for joining us this week, and thank you all for listening. We'd love to hear all of your thoughts on The Good Place. There will be a post dedicated to this episode up on SnarkSquad.com. You can also join our community on Patreon at patreon.com/SnarkSquad. And you can find us on Twitter at Snark_Squad. You can find me at My Name is Marines.
I'm at Sweeney Says.
And I am Jenny_Trout.
Thank you as always to Stefan Chin for the fancy theme music that is playing us out right now. And we will be back in your feed next week. Bye.
Bye.